All right, welcome. My name is Leslie Dean. I'm the executive director of the Ellis County Children's Advocacy Center. And we had a full house this afternoon, so I apologize. I'm kind of screeching in at the last moment. I am doing this presentation online, and you can also participate as we're talking. It's a Menti presentation. So if you would like to please join, you can either use the QR code that's on the screen. So people that are joining online, can they see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. And then I'm supposed to be able to use my phone as the remote. We're going to see if that works. So I'm going to give y'all just a second to go on to the presentation. And it should show you, once you get on, you should have just a page that says maybe instructions on it. So close. So I grew up here in Ellis County, and so Ellis County is really, really important to me and to my family members. And like many of you guys, anybody grew up here their whole lives? So the rest of you are imports. You didn't see when the McDonald's went in on 77 or the expansion of the main highways and stuff all around Ellis County. I grew up before, when Walmart was over there at the Hobby Lobby's there now, but it was a really small Walmart. And so, as you can imagine, things have really changed over the years. And so it's hard for me to believe that we need to talk about child sex trafficking in my county that I grew up in, where I rode my bikes all over the town and didn't really worry about those kinds of things. I grew up in the 80s and my parents took naps. I don't know what that would be like, raising kids in this day and age. I never took naps raising my kids. I was always kind of worried about them just riding around in the neighborhood and going anywhere and meeting up with anybody. But I did all kinds of stuff whenever I was younger that I probably wouldn't let my kids do now. And I got married and I moved away for a little bit, and I worked in a residential treatment center for emotionally disturbed children. And so these are kids that had been through chronic, many times sex trafficking, familial trafficking, sexual abuse, physical abuse. Most of the time it was chronic, long-term, complex traumas. And those kids had lots and lots of behaviors and things that were on their heart that kept them from being able to make it in public school and in foster homes or be adopted. And so our journey was to help them through those traumas and get them to the other side where they could trust and love again. Because I saw that, I'm so thankful to be on the front end where we get to work with families and kids at the very onset of investigations to show families that families are here to heal and support their children. And the stronger the families are, the stronger our kids are. So that is our overriding philosophy. So we're always trying to strengthen families and work from that perspective. So I'm very thrilled to be with you tonight because this is a part of strengthening families. When you know better, you do better. And so I hope that this will be a great conversation to have tonight because it's been very eye-opening for me as a professional and being in the field for almost 30 years now. So that's me. And to me, I love this picture because of the umbrellas. Can y'all see the same thing? Yeah. Because you think about protection of your kids from the rain and from all the things that we try to protect our children from. And it's really hard sometimes to protect kids from things that you can't see or that you don't recognize. Move this up a little bit so I'm not feeling like I'm hunched over. Is that a little bit better? Okay. So I'd like for you to take a minute, if you've tapped into the presentation, just take a couple of words or a sentence, and let us know, what do you want to learn about child sex trafficking tonight? Is there something that you would like, that you don't know, that you'd like to know? It's anonymous. It's not going to put your name up there or anything. But I would just like to kind of get an idea of some of the things that are on your mind. Let's see. Okay. Sorry, I was trying to open that up, but it's not. Is it allowing you to type things in it? Okay. Show responses. Oh, thank you. Oh, and there your answers are. Okay, let's see some of the things that you put. Okay, ways to prevent. What kind of education for our kids? Protection, prevention, identification, safety measures, warning signs. Okay, what is it, by the way? There's so many definitions out there. That's a great question. How and where is it happening? Yeah, I think we have the answers to the majority of those questions. And if I don't hit something, then let me know. Okay, so the first thing is really like, what is human trafficking? What is exploitation? Human trafficking is the illegal trade of human beings. It's mainly for forced labor or sex. And it's the world's fastest growing criminal industry. Now, if you take a second and think, just soak that in for a little bit, has anyone ever had their automobile stolen? It is the most, like, when someone steals your car, like, what are some of the feelings that you feel when someone steals your car? Yeah. My husband, he got a new truck. He had the same truck for like 20 years. And he finally got the courage to go take on a car note and get the truck that he dreamed of. It was a really cool truck. It wasn't brand new, but it was really new to him, and it was real pretty. And we took it to Dallas. We parked it in this garage, and he parked it, in a way that he thought was going to be the safest way. And we got out and we walked in with a couple of our friends. We just gotten the windows tinted, and we walked into the building, and we were there most of the day. We have no idea when this happened. And late in the afternoon, it was time, we were tired, and it was time to go home. And we go out into the parking lot, and it was just gone. It was just gone. There was no broken glass. It's not even, you couldn't even tell that anything was ever there. And it was such a violation. It shook my husband. Like, he felt like the need for protection, the need for those things. And you hear about all the auto theft, and you think theft has to be the number one thing, but this is the fastest growing thing. This is the fastest growing thing. That alarms me. And then the other thing that that stood out to me was, according to national consensus, up to 97% of victims are actually not identified. So not just the majority, most. In fact, it's more rare when they are identified, only 3%. And so that's something that was really eye-opening to me. So we need to understand how to recognize it when we see it. And we're going to talk about some of those things this evening. So this slide kind of breaks it down. It may be kind of hard for you guys to see, so I'm going to read a portion of it. Exploitation is an umbrella term for a range of crimes of a sexual nature committed against children and adults. And exploitation is not always trafficking, but trafficking is always exploitation. It is a form of exploitation. Can anybody think of any other ways that a child may be exploited besides sex trafficking? Could be sexual abuse. What about images that people take of kids? So we see a lot of sexual abuse materials is what we call them. And so that is one of the things that's exploitation. It's not trafficking per se, but it is exploitation. Okay, and then the other thing is the definition says some very specific things. I'm gonna push it to the next slide because you can see it a little bit better. Can y'all see that one a little bit better? Okay, so there's some specific terms. It can be just the recruitment, the enticement, harboring, transporting, providing, obtaining, and or maintaining the minor for the purpose of exploitation. Okay, so if they're in a car and they're traveling to do this act, that is trafficking. They don't even have to have had anything happen. The fact that they're going from point A to point B for that purpose is trafficking. Also, commercial sexual exploitation and sex trafficking of minors, they're overlapping but distinct terms. But all of it is abuse. All of it is child abuse. And sometimes we forget, because of the labels we put on things, that when children have sex for money, that is abuse to them. And then also you can define trafficking as survival sex for some kids. And we'll talk about that in just a second. We've also, yes, sir.
Is trafficking different from identified as being different? I mean, the first example you gave about driving over, even with there's nothing sexual going on, they think about it. So is that different? Or would it be not defined different?
Those are defined differently in the Texas Penal Code as to actually, and it's what the purpose is for. You may kidnap a child for the purpose of trafficking, and it may be both. Okay, but if you can imagine a child is with a person that is known to them and they weren't taken, they're just traveling along with this person and they get pulled over, but it's for the purpose of going from Waxahachie to Dallas to go work. Does that make sense? Okay. That's a really great question. Thank you. We're trying to change some of the terms. So a prostituted child, we use that instead of a child prostitute. Now, some people will say, oh, that's just semantics. You're just, but it does change who to blame it. Who's the blame, right? So our language is important. Words have meaning. And so you'll see some of that happening in our field. Here's another one, child sexual abuse materials. We call it CSAM. Used to, people would call it child pornography. Well, when you say child pornography, what does that indicate to you?
When the child participated, women, maybe, it's like what happened. They're participating.
Right. And what does child sexual abuse materials say to you? It is child abuse. Yeah. And so it puts the blame on where the blame should go. And also, something that I think is important is that sometimes our laws in the penal code don't change as fast as like our language in the field. And so even though we know better, it takes sometimes years, and sometimes they don't change it ever, to get changed in the penal code. So you might see you might still see child pornography, or you might see prosecutors use the word child pornography, and it's not because they're not informed, it's just that's their legal terms for the penal code and what's happened. It can also be called child sexual abuse images. That's another code that you'll see is it's CSAI. And then something that's really hard to grapple with is that it can be self-generated. I've been amazed to see how easily kids are willing to give up nude photos of themselves to others. Also, CSAM can be used as leverage and blackmail for kids that are just talking with someone online, and then they playfully send a video or send something that they don't intend to be used against them later, because their minds are not even thinking that far ahead. They're thinking about the relationship that's in front of them, and they're not thinking about how the relationship can be leveraged against them in the future, or what their behavior right now can be done in the future. So that can be a really dangerous entry point into this. Okay, here's a multiple choice question for you. So what do you think the average age of victims entering into a trafficking situation? What do you think the average is? Okay. This is a really smart and intelligent group. No, you guys are just informed. The average age is 11 to 14 years old. And that syncs up with what we're seeing at the Children's Advocacy Center. We deal with the most heinous child abuse crimes that happen in Ellis County. And these are our kiddos that we serve and work with law enforcement and child protective services to do joint investigations. And so we facilitate that. And in that, we are seeing victims as young as 11 years old. This past week, not from our county, but from another county, 6 years old. So yes, it is happening at very young ages. But what else is happening at 11 to 14-year-old age kids? What are they doing? What? Puberty. Oh, yeah, that's one big one. That's a big, scary one. What else is happening? Yeah, I keep thinking, y'all know the Texas Theater, they revived it. I saw the movie Stand By Me in that theater when it was like the original. So Stand By Me was the first movie that my grade went to, like we all went out and met at the movies. Do you know what I'm saying? So we were like away from our parents for the first time, going and doing a big group activity. And so that's what kids are doing at age 11 to 14. They're starting that developmental stage of individuating and kind of moving a little bit away from their parents and starting to cling to peer groups. Okay. And if you can imagine what is going through boys and girls' brains at this time, is that they want to belong. They want to belong. They want to belong. Okay. And so you'll see that traffickers know this very well. They know the developmental stages sometimes better than we do. And they know that this is a really extremely vulnerable time frame for kids. Okay. So you guys are smart. And this video, I'm hoping it will be big enough for you guys to see. And I'm not sure about the sound. Can I test it and see if the sound works? Play video. Oh, it's thinking. I see it thinking, so. Let me pause from here. Okay, so then maybe it won't play. Okay. It's not really a big deal. We're doing a good job of defining it for you tonight.
Human trafficking, commercial sexual exploitation, and forced labor seem a world away. But according to the International Labor Organization, there are more slaves at this moment than at any other time in history. UNICEF tells us that of the estimated 40.3 million people subjected to modern slavery and psychological bondage, approximately 70% of those are women and girls, some as young as 6 years old, with abusers who can range from family members and acquaintances to gangs and persons unknown. How is it possible that something so insidious has become widespread? A recent report by the University of Texas at Austin states that in Texas alone, there were almost 80,000 sexually trafficked youths. What methods could possibly allow victims from all walks of life to be exploited and abused in this way, from the most vulnerable and at risk to those from privilege? The process can be one of violence, including kidnapping, or desperation where sex is traded for food, shelter, or necessities for existence. But often, it's a case of careful grooming, identifying a victim by looking for vulnerabilities. Traffickers target victims with emotional neediness, low self-esteem, and those under stress. By gathering information in an interested way, the goal is to create trust and build dependency, while isolating the abused from family and friends. Through phone calls and social media, the trafficker begins slowly, often supplying phones and other devices so that communication can be continuous and undercover. By fulfilling a need, the trafficker strives to become everything to their victim, including becoming the only person they can trust. Often the dependency building includes gifts, drugs, or alcohol, but sometimes it's simply the fulfilling of a desperate need to be seen. Once trust is established and dependency is complete, control begins. Often there's been nothing asked of the victim until this point, when suddenly the threat of violence and sexual demands leave the victim confused, fearful, and psychologically battered. Sexual exploitation and physical abuse create chronic overstimulation of the brain, as the threat of violence leads the abused to stay on high alert. The true horror is that even rescued survivors have years of recovery ahead, since recovery requires overriding trauma-related neural pathways that years of victimization create. Sadly, any association with the sex industry creates an unforgiving stigma that both shames and blames the victim. Too often, survivors are treated as criminals, as we overlook the process that has created these circumstances and the devastating consequences that can last a lifetime. This must stop. It will take deep understanding and multiple healing strategies in order to help survivors develop needed skills such as self-confidence, problem-solving, and self-regulation. Only in this way can survivors distance themselves from their traffickers, reestablish their identity, and come to believe that they have inherent value.
Okay, that pretty much sums up what's going on. So are y'all interested to hear kind of what's going on here in Ellis County? Now I've shared some of these cases with the counseling staff, and I will tell you that Red Oak is their counselors here. They will pick up the phone and they will call if there's any question. I've had lots of conversations with several of the counselors here, and they're just their eyes are open and they're looking for these clues. And so we depend on our community and our teachers to understand what to look for. And so I'm going to give you some case scenarios that have happened over the last probably 3 to 4 years. I will change some details in it, so it may not be exactly the same because I have to protect the innocent. I'm not going to give you names or things like that, but I will give you some situations that might point out the type of a type of trafficking or a type of grooming that you need to know about. The first one I call first bell pickup. And the reason why this is important was we had a kiddo that was living with a grandparent, and grandmother was bringing child to school and thought that the child was going into the school building and safe. And what was happening is the child was not going into school in a safe place. They were just walking through the school and going and getting in the car and leaving with a person. So there were lots of absences, and the school was trying to contact the grandparent, but the kiddo was smart and blocked the school's number from grandma's phone And so she had no idea she wasn't getting communicated with through the normal way that the school communicated with her. Grandparents sometimes are not the best on emails and texting and all of those things. And so that can be a vulnerability. But we have a lot of kids living with grandparents and great grandparents. And so that's something to take into consideration because this kiddo, we were able to actually locate her. She'd already been all the way up to Oklahoma. And you may think, oh, this kid is going to school every day, so there's no way that they could be trafficked, but they can go into a school, leave, go for the day, come back, and they can do that during school time. Another one is peer recruiter. We see this a lot where peers get into this group of people, and it happens to them where they're kind of stuck in this life, and then they're told to go and recruit additional friends to come party with them. Sometimes they're even promised, oh, it's not gonna be the same for them. We just want some more people to hang out with, and they'll make up any lie to the kids just to get them to feel more comfortable. And so usually peer recruiting happens, they'll take them to like a party and introduce this kid to this group of people, and it starts there. It's as easy as that. Some kids are threatened that if they don't do something that they're going to hurt them or someone that they love. They will find out lots of information about the kid, and so they'll threaten, like, I know where your little brother is, or your mom and dad, or those kinds of things. And so there's a lot of threats that happen once they're kind of caught up into a point where they are having to recruit others into it. We did have a peer recruiter that actually moved into our county from the Houston area. Her mother had been involved with prostituting her as a child, and so they moved her in this area to get away from that. But she kind of picked up where she left off and met a new group of friends, a new group of people, and started recruiting out of Ellis County. This peer recruiter stands out to me because it was one of them, who she recruited led down a course for a kid that we worked with to, when they talk about pipeline to prison, this child had a pipeline to prison. And it was a clear moment in time when the Children's Advocacy Center and all of the other entities that are here to protect children, like all of us failed in one way or another. And it wasn't because we didn't have policy. We just didn't have the structure or know what we were seeing. We didn't know what to do with it. And so when this kid happened, and I knew that the child had been through some traumas, we just didn't know what was going on. It was too late. And so once we figured out what actually happened, we were like, never again are we going to do this in Ellis County. We've got to do this better. And so you'll kind of see some of our response to that in a minute. So the next one is CSAM got the t-shirt equals trafficked. This case is one that was our first human trafficking case that went to Ellis County courts. The case actually happened in October of this year. Can you believe that Ellis County has never had a trafficking case before that? Part of it is because they may not have enough evidence. It may have been, parts of it may have been trafficking, but they may not have evidence to prove that. So they go a lesser charge or a different charge or something that they know that that we can win this, or we can hold the person accountable if we go this direction. So it's not that our prosecutors don't want to prosecute, they do, but this case was a very clear human trafficking case. Is anybody familiar with Discord? It's a gamers app. Well, that's kind of what it started at. Yes, some people, yes. My husband uses Discord he likes to do strategy games, And so they'll have their strategy game, and then they'll kind of go over to Discord where they can have all those people that are strategizing on that game they can like set up raids, and we're going to do this at this time, and we're going to, and they have their own private channel. And he's met some really good friends through there from all different parts of the world, like Germany, and he met someone, a firefighter in, I think, New York, and another guy that was from California. So, and you could get on the phone and talk to them, and it wasn't going through their phone. They just did it through the app. You can video chat through that app, and I'm a mom. My kids are adults now. I have a 24-year-old and he's about to be 22. And if I wouldn't have known that they had Discord, would I have known to check that to see if that's a way that they were communicating with people? Probably not. So if parents don't know that other apps have systems of communication within them, it's really hard to monitor that. But this kiddo met a person on the Xbox and was playing games with him, and he said, "Hey, let's create a channel over here." And that was still normal to her because it was a gaming experience. Well, then they just started building a relationship online in this channel together. And then remember I was telling you earlier about how people will ask you to send you nudes or whatever like that. And so this guy was really smart. He was like, "Hey, I am a graphic designer and I will send you a really cool t-shirt. Why don't you send me your address?" And so she did, because she was, by that time, this 14-year-old was in love with this man. And so she sent her address. He sent her a t-shirt. It was really cool. And she put it on and she took pictures and sent it to him. And he said, "Okay, now you owe me." And basically said, in order to pay for this, you've got to send me some nude pictures. Well, she was already roped and she really liked this guy, thought he was really cool. And so she felt obligated to begin sending him pictures back and forth. It continued on and on. But what he was doing that with multiple victims and uploading them to the internet. And she had no idea that they were being sold on the black market. So that was how he started. But then he had the courage to get on an airplane and come all the way from Las Vegas to Ellis County. Well, he came to Dallas, and then he came to Ellis County. But he ended up here in Ellis County in one of our hotel rooms, where he sexually assaulted our kiddo. And that man received life in prison in October. We had, for that case, we had a lot of evidence that you don't always have. Okay, so in sexual assault cases, you don't always have physical evidence. But in this case, there was plenty of physical evidence. You don't always have digital evidence because sometimes they figure out how to get it off of their equipment before law enforcement is able to get it. In this case, he was uploading stuff all the time. They found a ton of evidence in that area. The forensic interview, which is something that the Children's Advocacy Center provides for children, we had a picture perfect outcry in an interview that happened. It was a great interview where the child gave lots of details and lots of information, and the forensic interviewer followed the process exactly how they're supposed to do it. So all of these things kind of, there was information about his flight. There was information how they were talking to each other back and forth. So for it to be our first trafficking case, it was like a slam dunk. Not all of these cases are going to be that easy. Not that it was easy, but they're not going to all be that clear cut and straightforward. So the next one is familial trafficking, which is really hard for me to just understand, but I see how it can happen. I've worked with kids that it's happened to quite a bit. And sometimes family members will introduce the victim to this lifestyle, and the kids kind of think it's normal. And then it can be a form of survival trafficking. So if you can imagine, roof over our head or just this thing, food in our bellies for all my children, or my teenage daughter. They're having to make value decisions that are ones that we may not ever think we will have to make. And so I'm not saying that it's okay at all. What I'm saying is I just understand how things like that can happen. If you mix in drug use, depression, all of the mental health issues, you put that all together, and these things happen more than we'd like to admit. So survival trafficking or survival sex, you'll see it in those couple of those different terminology, but that is sex for food, shelter, clothing, even drugs. Okay, so what in the world are we going to do about this? Because it seems like a pretty bad problem, right? Before I move on, does anybody have any questions about cases that we're seeing in Ellis County? Is anybody surprised about the cases that we're seeing here? Does it line up with what you thought might be happening? Yes? Okay.
I'm surprised about the methods. I think about kidnapping. Like you said, when we were growing up, that was the big thing, right? Stay away, say no.
Stranger danger, the
Right,
white van
right.
kind of thing.
And I've always kind of processed this in my head as something similar. Somebody just scoop a kid up, they all go, right? But that sounds very, very, I wouldn't say security. They have these things called advanced persistent threats.
Yes.
So not just simply hacking, right? I'm in there now, right? Let me just.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, say it again. Advanced persistent threats.
Yeah.
That's exactly what is happening to our
And
kids.
I'm like, wow.
Thank you for giving me that term. I may use it. Okay, so with these advanced persisting threats, we've got to do something. So we started looking out, like who was doing this well, who's already working on this, and we found that the governor's office sex trafficking team did have like some protocols and things in place already. Would you believe that Ellis County was just the 12th county in Texas to put something in place? So we were the 12th, after big ones like Bexar County and San Antonio, Dallas, Tarrant County, some of those things. I think Johnson County may have beat us by maybe a couple of months. But I'm very competitive, and I'm like, not in my county. And we had that kiddo that I was telling you about. We're like, we need a plan. So you get Leslie Dean's, you get me in that mode, and we were like, we're going to get this done, and we're going to get it done right and quickly, so that next kid that comes across our in our field of view, that we know what to do. So we also started working with the district attorney's office, all of the law enforcement PDs and sheriff's office that in our county. We started pulling them together and developing protocols. So that's like, you're going to do this, and you're going to do that, and this person's doing this, and we all know what our role and responsibility is, and that's how we facilitate these investigations. Everybody's got a part, but we had some missing pieces because we weren't the experts yet. We have been baptized by fire now, but we weren't the experts then on how to work with trafficking victims. And at the Children's Advocacy Center, that really wasn't our role. Once we did this joint investigation thing, we try to connect families with the resources that they need. And so Traffic 911 is a nonprofit organization that's housed in the Dallas area. And they cover several of the Dallas-Fort Worth counties, and they provide what they call CSA advocacy or victim advocacy. So that was one agency we said, come down to Ellis County, please. We need help here with that. The other agency that was not involved with what we were doing was CASA. And anybody know who CASA is? Court-appointed special advocates. So those are kids that are in foster care, that are in the state system, that need someone to be with them and go throughout the court case. So they're volunteers, and we have a really great CASA group here with 100% coverage of our kids, because we only have 51 kids that are in foster homes from Ellis County right now. So they have 100% coverage. So if we have a kid that's in foster care that's from Ellis County, that CASA worker is going to be assigned and they're going to be involved, and they are a great resource to have because they are about building relationships with kids. So, let's talk about, so that was our response. Our response is to come up with a plan, and we had a pretty good plan. We've had it in place since 2021, and we just keep getting better and better at it now. So some victimology. Oftentimes these kids, people want to see this image at the top and see them as kids that are in bondage, and they'll use the words like slavery and things like that. But the ones that are on the bottom, those oppositional, defiant, like I don't want to talk to authority figures. I'm not talking to the police, teachers, and administrators. They kind of push them back, and so I usually call them our prickly pears because they're real prickly. They're often distrustful of authority, especially law enforcement. They don't always see themselves as victims. In fact, how they got here was through a lot of choices that they made. Okay, but what was it? Tell me again that term. Persistent, advanced, persistent threats. So they don't see them as threats. They see them as love. They see them as you're meeting a need that I have. It's advanced and it's persistent, and it takes them way off guard. So they're not victims. They're in it with them. Sometimes they're just too traumatized to report it as abuse or even see it as abuse. They may be fearful that the traffickers will hurt someone that they love or that they won't be safe. Sometimes they think they're going to be charged with a crime. In fact, traffickers will tell them over and over, they're going to arrest you also. So even though police has done a really good job of trying to change that and be victim-centered, and when they finally do have an opportunity to have a child that they're removing or rescuing, that they're trying to change that. But the traffickers use it to show that, you're with us, and they're going to see you as a criminal. And sometimes they just don't even know it's abuse. And then also there's Stockholm syndrome or a trauma bond. We use the word trauma bond because they will form this bond with their abuser or their trafficker. This happens more than just in trafficking cases. It happens in other types of abuse as well. But those kinds of things can make it really difficult for kids to get out. But this is what they look like on the inside. And I have to remind myself all the time that these kids may have seen things and know things that children their age should not ever know or see or talk about. But that doesn't mean they're grown-ups. They're still developmentally like this little baby. And we need to see our kids like this. Sometimes I think we want them to grow up so fast, and we have these expectations of adulthood. And so I got this quote from a grandmother who wrote a book to other parents about how to deal with a child that's been trafficked. Her granddaughter had been trafficked. And it says, "Your child did not choose this. They were chosen, then targeted and groomed." And so when we think about kids that have hardened or their behaviors are ugly or they're prickly pears, then we have to remember that they look like that precious little baby girl. I just like to look at her. Okay. When you're talking about sex trafficking, I'd much rather look at her. Okay. So some tips to deal with vulnerability, because that's what, whenever you have this persistent, grooming that's happening, how do you deal with this threat? You understand where the vulnerabilities are, and you address that and you see it. So traffickers target their victims by looking for vulnerabilities. They look at emotional neediness. They look at low self-esteem, economic stress, and runaway children are particularly vulnerable. I worry about our runaway kids. I also really am concerned about our LGBTQ kids that do not have parental support, or because of their choices, their parental stability is not there, because that forces them right into even more vulnerabilities, right? We talked earlier about what 11 to 14-year-olds is really important to them. So belonging is important to everybody. I mean, all of us need to belong, but traffickers use those same tactics on adults. It's just that kids are so much more vulnerable. They don't have to work as hard. And kids depend on adults. Sometimes adults can break away, and even though it's really difficult, adults have they have a more advantage of being able to break away from it than a child does, because children usually are completely dependent on adults, and they make it even more so. So I created this for counselors, for like kind of a field guide to being able to identify vulnerabilities. And so we've talked about a lot of these things, but I just want to point out a couple of things that make kids more vulnerable. So prior juvenile justice services. So kids that have gotten in trouble with the law, maybe they were stealing, or they got in a fight with their parents and there's a physical assault or something like that. So that entry point is sometimes an indicator, or also Child Protective Services involvement. If they lack caregiver supervision or involvement. So what we have seen a lot of is not moms that don't care, but moms that are working nights. Moms that are working overnight, and so they have, grandma at home, and they're doing the best they can. They're spinning all the plates, and they're trying to make it happen, but then supervision's not happening in the evening, and grandma just can't keep up with the technology and what all's happening. That's an example. That's not, across the board. I'm not going to generalize that's what's happening everywhere, but we see that a lot. Housing or food insecurities. Kids that are having health issues, sleep deprivation, or you'll see a change in their appearance, like a sudden change. Unhealthy or inappropriate romantic relationships with peers or adults. If they have unexplained money or gifts, or you see cell phones that they have 2 cell phones, or if they didn't have a cell phone and all of a sudden they do have a cell phone, some things that are unexplained, when you ask them about it, it doesn't really make sense, or it doesn't, they have really no way to have gotten those things. And then sometimes they'll talk about traveling to places that are inconsistent with their circumstances. Okay, here's some more things to be on the lookout for. Kids who appear on edge, they're preoccupied with safety, or maybe hypervigilant. You guys know, can y'all imagine hypervigilant, what that might look like? We had a little girl who was really afraid of her biological father, and when she was at the center, her hypervigilance was about the sound of trucks. Every time she heard a loud truck going by, she thought that was her dad, and she would panic and hide. And so she's hypervigilant, so every noise that she hears is something like that. Difficulty to detect or respond to danger cues. I've seen this with kids in residential treatment who are very exposed to violence. There would be a fight break out right next to them. They're just sitting there eating their Cheetos, like nothing's going on, just watching TV, just tuning it out. And there's a violent fight happening right next to them. So their response to those things is real different. Self-destructive, aggressive, risk-taking behaviors. We see kids are pretty stressed out if they lose their phones, but if a phone is taken away from them and they freak out in a really big way, that doesn't mean that they are being trafficked. It means that that there may be something to that. Sometimes they have an abusive or controlling intimate partner that they'll talk to you about, okay, because that seems to be safe to talk about a boyfriend. In fact, we hear the word boyfriend a lot. Oftentimes, they will start isolating the children or the kids from their family members and their friends. I often thought about what this might be like for one of my kids. My daughter is really into anime. Anybody else into anime in here? no, because you're like over, 20 years old. No, I'm just kidding. She loves anime. She loves it so much, y'all. And I have a really hard time she wants to tell me all about the story and the whole thing, and I just can't get into it. I'm the worst mom. I'm like, it just doesn't, it's just not my thing, but I listen to her stories. But if I were a trafficker, I would love anime. I would love everything about anime, and I would have all the stuffed animals, and I would have all the stickers, and I would know all the characters, and I would talk about how this character loved that character, and we would just have conversations, and we would say stuff like, your mom will never understand you in this level. She just will never get it. And he'd start pulling us apart and saying how I really don't love you because I don't want to understand anime. I thought about it a lot, about how someone could try to isolate my kids from us. So we talked about it a lot. Like, I know I don't like anime, but I will listen to you no matter what. Okay. Let's see. Sometimes their friends or family or acquaintance might actually receive a threat. And then a lot of times kids will give you vague or misleading information about their age or their whereabouts or their residence or relationships. And I know we've had some kids that have come into the school district and leave, and these guys are like, who is this and where are they and where'd they come from? They're trying to find out all the information about these kids because it's really important to get that from the beginning. So we have this thing that we're starting, and I have some handouts for you guys. There's some posters that we would love for y'all to look at and share, and then also there's stickers. So that our ploy here is that we are going to get these stickers out all over the place, and kids are going to have them on their computers, and they're not going to know what in the world does it mean to have someone I know, and have this girl on there, and it's just the only point is just to spark interest. Right? And it has a QR code on it. And if you go to the QR code, I don't know if you can use your phones to get to it or not, but on the posters there should be. Is there a QR code on the poster as well? Yeah. So you can put it on your phone and do the QR code there. But the whole idea is to generate interest, and then they go to see this poster on a web page. And then it's actually connected to the Children's Advocacy Center website, and it has on there the National Child Sex Trafficking Hotline, I think it's the, hang on a second. It is the National Human Trafficking Hotline, actually. So it's connected to that, and what we're hoping to do with that is just to get the message out for kids to recognize their friends or themselves in it, and then reach out to someone that can help them. When you get to that human trafficking website, if you click on the picture and go there, there's an automatic shut off switch where you can immediately get out, and it changes the page and it goes to like Google or some random website, so that if abuser is there, they can have quick access to leave it. So that's a safety feature of the thing. But the most important thing is to get the information out to our kids so that they can see. So we have about 1 million of those posters and a whole lot of stickers. And so we're going to start dispersing those out to schools and to civic groups and kids groups and hopefully churches and things like that, because it's here among us. Okay, we've talked quite a bit about warning signs. I was just going to see if there's anything in here. This one stuck out to me as one of the survivors, that they have this feeling of being stuck, and so they'll say stuff like, I just feel like I'm stuck and I can't go and get anywhere or leave. They're not going to tell you where they're going or what they're trying to leave from. Or they might say, I just want to move. I want to get out of this town. Now, I was saying that as well. At 18, I was like, peace, I'm out. I'm going to school. I was really independent, Gen Xer. So that's not what I'm talking about, y'all. I'm talking about like 11 to 14-year-old kid that's saying, I just want to leave my town. there's something else that may be going on there. Even if it's not trafficking, there may be a psychological or behavioral thing that's happening to make them feel that way. Okay. Here's some more. It looks really small to you guys. So there's also going to be a link to this on your phone. If you accessed it, you should be able to get back into it and see it, or you can see it on your phone. You should be able to see it on your phone right now as we're going through it. Let me see if there's anything. Oh, this was interesting to me that they frequently will hold stuff like their driver's license or their keys or their school ID if they don't have a DL, or their social security card or things like that, so that they can have control over them. And so if your person that you're worried about is always losing something or says they can't find that thing, or they don't know where their driver's license is, or those kind of things, you may want to just consider that. Kids and teenagers, there's a lot of other things that could be at play with any of these things, right? So whenever you see symptoms like this with any kind of abuse, I would just give you some caution that one thing does not equal this child's being trafficked, right? But these are things to be looking for. You have this indicator, you have that indicator, Ask yourself some questions, get to know the kiddo, and just understand what the warning signs could be. Okay. So some helpful resources. Polaris is, they house the national hotline. And so they have a lot of statistics. So if you're wanting to get national statistics, one of the things that it blows my mind is that where the hubs are in Texas, and they have a map. And the map shows like really bright spots where it's heavily human trafficked. Tyler is one of those spots. It's on that thoroughfare going out towards Louisiana. Ellis County, we have some really great highways and byways that were created to move what? Y'all remember what our big crop that we had in Ellis County in the olden days, in the early 1900s? We were moving cotton like nobody's business out of this place. And so they did a great job of making these great roads all around Ellis County. If you look at a map of Ellis County, you'll see all what's on here. 287, 77, we got 45 that's not too far away. Well, it's in Ellis County. 20 is just a hop, skip, and a jump. We got 35. I mean, all of these thoroughfares help move crops. They also help move people quickly. So something to think about. Also, if law enforcement can respond immediately if you suspect a child's being trafficked or have information that you think would be helpful in solving a case. Also, Child Protective Services, they may not investigate it if it's not someone that's in the household, but it can start a response. So if you're not sure about law enforcement, call Child Protective Services. You can always call the Children's Advocacy Center, but we're going to probably point you in one of those two directions, because that's how kids come to us, is through law enforcement or Child Protective Services. Okay. All right, what questions and things do you guys want to talk about? More cute kids. Yes, sir.
So, I think one of the slides, or maybe the 70% are young girls.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like you said, for 8 to 11, 14, are they seeing the same, I guess you could say, the same, I don't call it simple, but for young boys? Are they seeing that the same behaviors for young boys as they're seeing? I'm assuming that the majority of these are young girls that it's happening, right?
The majority it is, but
So
I think part of the problem is that boys are not studied as much, and they don't tell. And so whenever they say 97% is unidentified,
right.
That is the big problem. There needs to be more research. But would be willing to bet that you're going to see some of the same responses from boys than you do girls. We just they hide it even more.
I've worked with a prevention, trafficking prevention organization. They do work with the national side of things. They call it Remember New. But they put extra emphasis on boys, and I forget specifically what they mentioned, but it's increasing significantly. Again, part of the reason is stigma right now with boys saying anything. Right. But they say it's a lot more broad. Right.
And I think that I think that sometimes boys will experience things that they will show their emotions and do things in a different way. So instead of maybe showing like they're depressive or anxious, or they may show more aggressive or violent behaviors or start doing more risky behaviors. So you might see that they may be what's like if you had the tip of an iceberg that's, you have just the behaviors that are sticking out of the waters, and underneath it is all the same feelings and emotions that any person that's just wanting to belong, and then this is happening to them, like all those same feelings, but their behaviors that we see may look a little different, or they might hide it more. So they're just not used to talking about it as much. But I think there does need to be more research focused. I just had a research article that I've been reading that had to do with Traffic 911 and the governor's office, and it came out right as we were joining. And they did the study just on cis girls, and they were under age 18. Well, that's great to have that really, nice sample size for a study, but you miss out on the information about boys, and how to work with them and how to deal with it, how to identify it better. Because I think the victims are informing us more and more and more on how do we do this better? How do we see them better? That's an excellent question. We are not seeing that as in terms of a pattern. I know that there have been cases around Ellis County, like not too long ago, there was the thing that happened at the Mavericks game that got a lot of news coverage. So I do think things like that do happen. I'm just not seeing it in a pattern, but what I do see is that they'll meet someone that they met online, and then meet him like at the Walmart or something, and then they end up in Dallas, like boom, and so not necessarily we kind of think transportation, but they meet up and just at the local Walmart. I mean, that kind of thing. Yeah. So part of it is like that, the movie that came out this summer about trafficking, it's more of an international kind of feel, and it does go into a lot that's happening in the world. I bring these cases because these are happening right here, and this is what our experience has been. And it's good for all of us to know and to bring awareness to the whole problem. Whenever it says, 80,000 kids in Texas, that blows my mind. But how does that happen? Well, it doesn't make sense that it would happen like with people just driving by and grabbing kids and going off, because this place would be insane. We would be crazy. We would be like guns a-blazing, right? If that was happening to our children. They're sneakier than that. They're in that constant, persistent, that thing. They're doing that, right? So that is the danger, is that it's happening under our noses. It's creepy crawly. It's gradual. It's grooming, and it's mixed in with what our kids are needing and wanting, and so they think it's their idea. So, I want to leave you with some hope, though, that we're doing everything that we can to pull in the partnerships that we have. I want to thank Reach Council for inviting us to come and talk tonight, because this is something that's near and dear to my heart, and I want to do something different for our kids. And so we are looking at pilot programs with Ennis Police Department to go kind of get ahead of this problem and start looking at high risk youth and runaway behavior and trying to get ahead of that. Like, why is that happening? Because those are our high risk kids for trafficking. We're also working with the governor's office on additional grants to bring more funding into Ellis County to address these things on a larger scale. And we provide free mental health services. We have groups for kids. We have groups for adults, for our parents. And so we're really trying to provide some services that can make a difference. Our kiddo that I was telling you about that she went through a whole trial in October where the guy got life in prison. She has a life of recovery ahead of her, but she was able to graduate therapy services, and so she's closed one chapter, and so she's ready to take on the next thing. So we are seeing hope and healing that's happening in Ellis County, and we need you guys to be our eyes and ears, our ambassadors out here in our community, to help us identify and then do something about the kids that are needing our help. So thank y'all very much. I'll stick around and